Hello, my name is Fiona McFarlane and I'm Head of Public Affairs at the Promise Scotland. This is an edited version of a webinar that went out in May 2022 and hopefully it will give you a bit of an insight into the work of the Hearing System Working Group. Just to give you a bit of background, the Hearing System Working Group started in October 2021 and it's set up as a collaborative project between the Promise Scotland, Children's Hearing Scotland and SCRA, Scottish Children's Reporters Administration. Its purpose is to convene a redesign of the children's hearing system, implementing the conclusions of the Independent Care Review and the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. It will report in April 2023. It's chaired by Sheriff David Mackey, who has a long history and experience in youth justice, restorative justice and children's hearings appeals in his work as a sheriff at Alloa Sheriff Court. I hope you find this webinar useful, and if you've got any more questions about it, there's an email address at the end in which you can get in touch with us. But thanks very much for watching and enjoy. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Hearing System Working Group informational webinar. Sorry for the slight delay. We've been having a bit of a technical hitch, but we're underway now. We hope you're going to find this a useful resource for understanding the work we're doing. And can I just mention before we really get started and before I forget that this is being recorded and is likely to be put up on the website at some point. So I just want to make you aware of that. Before we get into the work and the issues that the group is looking at, I want to take some time to set it in context, to understand the background of what it is that we're trying to do. As you all know, the Independent Care Review, a root and branch review of Scotland's care system, concluded in February 2020. It had much to say on Scotland's unique hearing system, and the Scottish Government accepted the findings of the review and promised to implement its conclusions. The Promise Scotland is an organisation set up to support organisations with responsibility around the care system. In March 2020, the Promise Scotland published its Plan 21 to 24, that's 2021 to 2024, which sets out what must happen by 2024. And it is within that Plan 21 to 24 that the Hearing System Working Group is operating. Plan 21 to 24 said that by 2024 there should be a set of proposals that redesign the hearing system in line with the conclusions of the Independent Care Review and the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. The development of those proposals is the job of the working group. And it is critical that the work is collaborative and positive, and that those organisations that have most responsibility for the delivery of the hearing system are at the table devising solutions. Which is why, whilst I'm chairing this group, it is truly a collaboration between Children's Hearing Scotland and the Scottish Children's Reporters Administration, with the Promise Scotland facilitating and convening the work. We are working towards a timeline for publication of proposals in April 2023, and you'll hear more about the approach we're taking shortly. Critically, the Scottish Government has committed in its recently published implementation plan to a Promise bill in the later part of this Parliament. The intention of this bill is to scoop up the recommendations of this work, subject, of course, to ministerial approval. My aim, therefore, is to produce a set of proposals that are robust, workable, and can easily transition into the bill process and ensure that our hearing system does what Scotland needs it to do. There are a few things I want to say as we start. This work is positive and solution-orientated. The work of the Independent Care Review and other participation projects, such as Our Hearing, Our Voice, have already told us much about where the difficulties are. Those with experience of the hearing system are an integral part of the process. I've had the privilege of meeting with the young people from Our Hearing, Our Voice on a couple of occasions, and will keep in touch with them throughout the process. But we must also recognise that young people and families have been telling us for some time what isn't working. We know much already. We must now make change so that Scotland does not need to keep commissioning whole-scale reviews and working groups. We have the opportunity here to create something quite transformational. I also want to touch on the Kilbrandon report that underpins the hearing system. It set out an approach that Scotland is rightly proud of. Unlike many jurisdictions, Scotland takes an approach that children who commit offences should be treated through a care and protection lens rather than a justice approach. There is no sense that the pillars of the Kilbrandon approach are up for grabs here. The question is how to really apply the Kilbrandon approach in a far more developed and complex legislative landscape alongside the Human Rights Act, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, recognising that though not a court of law, the Children's Hearing is still a tribunal whose decisions are appealable. So before we move to outlining the issues list and the service design approach, my fellow working group members, CHS and SCRA, are going to share a bit about their work and their engagement in this work. So I'm going to hand over now to, if she's with us, Carol Wassell, who's the head of area support and community improvement of CHS. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you to all the team who were paddling so furiously in the background to get me online. So at Children's Hearing Scotland, I just want to restate really to everybody on the call our commitment to keeping the promise made by Scotland to its children and their families, and we will continue to do all that we can do to ensure that our children grow up to be safe, cherished, nurtured and loved. And it'll take all of us to do that, working towards a shared vision to make that happen. And it's been great having the opportunity to listen to everybody else speak before me today, actually, and just listening to the plans that are in place to make that happen. At Children's Hearing Scotland, our tribunal members, supported by area support teams, fulfil one of the most unique, important and challenging roles in public life. We want to make sure that they have what they need for us to be able to fulfil our vision, that as the legal tribunal for children in Scotland, Children's Hearing Scotland will uphold, promote and protect children's rights, deliver child and family friendly care and justice, and ensure that the participation of people who require the services of the hearing system informs what we do and how we do it. And our Children's Hearing Scotland community will be involved in shaping this change, and we're about to embark on a wide-ranging and comprehensive consultation and engagement programme with all of our people within CHS about the questions on the issue list. And that work will also feed into the more broader stakeholder engagement piece. So I always think it's worth pausing for a moment just to focus on why we're all here, really. It certainly helps me remember I'm quite a visual person. And at the moment, there are about 10,000 children in Scotland involved in the children's hearing system. And this image is, for me, a helpful visual depiction of what that looks like. And each one of the people in this picture, and those just off screen that you can't see, represent an infant, a child or a young person who is currently involved in the hearing system. And every single infant, child or young person that's represented by the people in this picture have individual needs, wants, likes, dislikes, experiences, a best friend, a favourite toy, food they don't like, favourite blanket, music they like, and all of those experiences for those children and young people will be different. And they also all have something in common, that for some aspect of their life, there is a concern about their short, medium or long-term well-being and or protection that has required a referral to the hearing system. Now, we want to see a reduction in the number of children who need the support of the hearing system, and the promise talks extensively about that. But for those children who do require it, we have 2,500 tribunal members, supported by a further 500 area support team volunteers, who sit on hundreds of hearings across Scotland every day of the week. And they have to create and hold a space where we pay close attention to the individual needs and wants of children, and also consider the at time competing wants and needs of the people in their lives, all within the context of a complex care system and complex legislative and policy landscape. So when families need to come to a hearing, we want to make that experience as seamless as possible, and a place where they feel they have been heard and have the opportunity to express their views, even if not everybody will get the decision that they necessarily want. And we want to make that experience as seamless as possible. And if you could share the second slide, please, Mary, thank you. So the independent care review told us that for too many children, the complexity of the law, processes and systems stop that seamless delivery of services at the point of experiencing services from happening, that the system serves its own convenience. And in the 1960s, Kilbrandon wanted to build a hearing system that focused on care and protection and treated children like children. And we still hold really dear to that principle, along with our colleagues at SCRA, within a changed society. And in 1971, 10% of the referrals into the hearing system were for care and protection, with 90% of referrals being about young people who had come into conflict with the law. The opposite of that is true today. And as a society and as organisations to try and keep up with those changes, we've made alterations to the policy and legislative landscape and to practice that have added to the hearing system's complexity, and that for too many people who come to the hearing system, and also those people who work within it, it can be difficult to find a way through that system that protects people's well-being and sense of having their rights upheld and protected. And if there is any doubt about this, then this map, which was developed by Celsius a while ago now, and I've no doubt there is a probably more up-to-date version, but still, it is a great visual depiction of the legal process for children in the care system and how multifaceted it is, and too often that the system causes harm because of its complexity. So support and actions that are meant to help children and families get what they need too often get lost because of the constraints of the system, despite the hard work and positive motivation of the individuals who work within it. And if you could stop sharing, thank you, Mary. So at CHS, working with their stakeholders, we are absolutely committed to change, whatever that needs to look like, to improve outcomes for children. And our starting point, as described by Kirsty and Rachel, is what children and their families tell us they want and they need. And we're becoming a trauma-informed organisation at Children's Hearing Scotland, a trauma-responsive organisation, and we will continue to embed the articles of the UNCRC in everything that we do. And we're working closely with the Promise, with SCRA and others to be clear about the scope of change that we within CHS can control and where we seek to influence and work with other agencies. So a positive experience of a hearing has to be supported by other organisations who work with families, and having good evidence of why a referral is necessary and clear plans in place agreed with families where possible about what help and support is needed allows tribunal members to make robust and defendable decisions. And we want to do this in a way that children and their families don't have to repeatedly listen to their history being played out time and again in a traumatising way. We also want to make sure that hearings are tailored to the children who use them. And children in the hearing system are not an homogenous group of people. For instance, about a third of the children that we see are under the age of 5 and 2/3 are under the age of 11. And CHS needs to consider how it exercises powers to ensure that the decisions taken within the hearing are acted upon by those with responsibility for providing family support in a way that delivers timely improvement to children's well-being and does not cause drift and delay towards permanent, emotional, physical and legal security for children. And working with the Office of the Chief Designer at the Scottish Government, we're reimagining a hearing system that takes cognizance of all of that and more into account in a meaningful way, and that what children and their family tell us they need informs how we deliver our services rather than children and families fitting to them. So members of the CHS community will also play a significant part in this work, with CHS undertaking the biggest consultation and engagement exercise since its formation. And over the next few months, this work will inform, shape and support the work of redesigning the hearing system. And with the changes that are coming and that we welcome in the Care and Justice Bill, that young people aged 16 and 17 will be supported by the hearing system and the ethos of trauma-informed care, the tribunal members will be called upon ever further to develop specialist knowledge that spans a multitude of personal and societal issues that face children and families and their rights and obligations within that. So we need to make sure we have a workforce, both paid and as lay and volunteer members, that are able to deliver a hearing system fit for the next 10 years and beyond. And we are the current custodians of the system, and we want our legacy to be that we build on our current work, both improvement and transformation, and that we deliver on our vision of upholding and promoting children's rights, of providing child and family care and justice, and putting participation at the heart of what we do. Thank you very much.
So, for all of us, keeping the promise is an exciting journey. The Scottish Children's Reporter Administration is absolutely delighted to be working in collaboration with all our partners and with children and families to improve and enhance the children's hearing system. This collaboration, as David said, is absolutely the way to develop our statutory protection of children in a rights-respecting and a trauma-informed way. SCRA was involved throughout the independent care review and welcomed the promise reports and the expectations that they create. Alongside our close partners in Children's Hearing Scotland, we are already involved in working and planning towards realising those expectations. It's important to note that we're embarking on a journey of redesign, not replacement. As David has indicated, the principles of Lord Kilbrandon that form the foundations of the children's hearing system still reflect important values for the system today and into the future. Taking a welfare-based approach to children's needs, based on a principle of minimum intervention, and involving the child and family in the decision making. We also recognise that we work in a system with many linked and constantly moving parts, a landscape that is always changing, and with children who themselves change constantly between birth and their 18th birthday. So none of this work is static, meaning the redesign process needs to be fluid and dynamic. As well as this collaborative redesign process, partners are already working together to improve the current system. Improvement, of course, isn't new to any of us, and within SCRA and our partners in CHS, we're always working together and striving for continuous improvement in children's hearings. What is different is the scale and the scope of our ambition. Although that is challenging, it's also very exciting and provides opportunity. We've been told through the promise and from many other sources, including our Hearing's Our Voice, as David mentioned earlier, the independent board of children who have experience of the children's hearing, and from numerous surveys and research over the years where improvements need to be made. And for those with day-to-day experience working in the system, paid and volunteer, we also see where we can change and where improvement can be made. Now is the moment to bring all of that experience together into the discussions and debates to shape the system into the best it can possibly be for our children and young people into the future. SCRA has an ambitious programme of improvement work. This is continuing the work that we've been doing for many years under the collaborative Better Hearings project. But as I said earlier, it's a very clear step up in scale and ambition. This work is captured in our Promise Route Plan and in our Rights, Inclusion and Corporate Parenting Plan. We'll focus on many areas of our system that can be improved without the need for any legislative change. We're supported in that work by our Hearing's Our Voice, making sure that our improvements are driven by the voice of those with current or recent hearings experience. This work will look at many different areas and issues, and we have been and will be reaching out to our partners for support with these. We're very grateful for the help of the Office of the Chief Designer in the redesign work that we are currently embarking on, and you'll hear much more of the detail of that shortly. We have already done a lot of preparatory work, mapping out the current landscape of the children's hearing system. This work is now being developed further through stakeholder engagement sessions taking place throughout this month, so that we have the most complete picture possible on which to base the redesign discussions. This engagement with all our partners and with those with experience of the system is essential. The recommendations that the Hearing System Working Group ultimately produce has to be informed by everyone with an interest. You'll hear later about the various ways that you can all get involved. I also want to recognise the context in which this important work is happening, a context that is really unprecedented. We are acutely aware of the impact of the last 2 years on all of us. Within SCRA, we know we are still recovering from the pandemic, and it has had a significant impact on our people. Change fatigue is a common experience across all our partners, and within SCRA, it's no different. The last 2 years has required almost constant change to adapt to the changing rules and environment. We have to be sensitive to this. But despite that challenging context, our internal engagement sessions in SCRA have been incredibly positive and enthusiastic. There's a real excitement and enormous interest in this work. Our people want to get involved. There is a challenge around their capacity to do so, and we are currently working on actions to create that capacity, because the involvement of our staff is vital. The Children's Reporter holds a unique place in our system. Our knowledge and experience is essential to inform the improvement work and the redesign. Although there is a level of anxiety about what the future may look like, this is a fantastic opportunity to shape that future. The role of the reporter features on the issues list in a very positive way, which is also reflected by the way that reporters and support staff in SCRA have indicated they want to be part of the solution into the future. We have the chance now to make proposals to resolve and improve some of the frustrations that we see whilst working in our system. I would like to acknowledge that the overall work required to realise the promise is enormous. The hearing system occupies a small part of our care and support landscape. The ambitions of our improvement to and redesign of the hearing system will be inextricably linked to improvements and redesign of other services. The change of culture, the transformational way that the provision of services is expected to be provided, so that children and families have the support they need when they need it, and provided in the way that they can best access it. Whilst reform will take some time, we will continue to improve and innovate in the confines of what we have to ensure that the experience of children, young people and their families is as good as it can be. The current consultation on the Children's Care and Justice Bill is the start of legislative reform which will see us keep the promise across the decision making of the children's hearing. We will see the age of referral to the Children's Reporter increased to 18 and potential consequential changes to how long a compulsory supervision order can last. We will see more older children with different issues who may require different ways of working and understanding. The Care and Justice Bill is a really good illustration of the way in which the children's hearing can adjust to offer relevant and proportionate support to children at different stages, at different ages and developmental stages. We think this is a major endorsement of the principles of the care and welfare-based hearing system. This legislative change will strengthen all of the work in relation to the redesign of the system, keeping the principles of Kilbrandon and keeping the promise.
Thank you, Alistair. I think what I'd like to do is say something about the issues list that I hope all of you have been able to access and see on our website. And for those who don't realise it, we actually have our own page on the Promise website. It's built up quite well. And quite a lot of what we're talking about today, you'll find a bit more detail of there. But as the work began and the group met, it was important to define the scope of our work. The hearing system touches on many aspects of children and families' lives, but there are some things that the hearing system is not responsible for. In looking across the range of work that has gone before, the group decided to organise their work through the various stages. That's the chronological stage of a child's journey through the hearing system. And we realised at the very beginning that the scope of our work really starts at the point of first intervention, of statutory intervention or other reference by a member of the public or whatever, right through the whole journey of the hearing system to the final conclusion of implementation of any decisions of the children's hearing. And so you'll see that our issues list reflects that. The first, we have 5 main headings. The first of these is called the scaffolding of the hearing system. And this looks at critical issues such as who an order attaches to, adherence to the principles of Kilbrandon. We're never going to let go of those fundamental principles of Kilbrandon. But after Kilbrandon came the Human Rights Act and the European Convention on Human Rights, the European Rights Act, and the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is particularly pertinent just now. So we are holding on to these real pillars of the system as we go about our work. But the next heading is avoiding the need for compulsory measures of supervision. It remains one of the main aspirations of the promise that the number of children and families having to be referred to the children's hearing system should be reduced. There's a strong feeling, a strong outcome of the independent care review is to realise that there was so much more that could be done with families before using the option of a referral to the hearing system. So what needs to happen to keep children and families outside of the hearing system? What role does the hearing system have in promoting family support? Can the reporters, for example, have an enhanced role during the period before referral? What role is there for family group decision making? The aspiration to reduce the number of children and families being referred to the children's hearing system implies a need for more and better resources to support families and children before that stage. And so we want to look closely at that. But equally, if children cannot return to their family of origin, then we have to look at what the hearing system can do to promote lifelong care. And so that brings us to the next main heading of our list of issues, which is the hearings itself, the children and their hearings. How does the hearing system need to change to promote consistency of decision making? This is a critical issue. It's remarkable that so many people volunteer in Scotland through the hearing system. Again, it is something we can be rightly proud of, but the care review raised whether it was a system that could promote consistency of decision maker. How can the experience of the hearing system and of attending hearings be made better, more positive and satisfactory for those children, young people and their families who have to go through it? How best can the voice of the child or young person be heard? Young people have told me that they do not want to have to keep retelling their story, but nor do they want to keep rehearing it. How can they get to know about the adults who are going to make important decisions in their lives? And these are all issues that have come up during the care review and during our initial discussions with young people. And it gives you a flavour of the sort of detail that would often go unnoticed if we didn't have the insight of those with care experience who've gone through the system and can tell us what really matters to them. And so much of it is to do with how they're treated in the hearing and around the hearing. A lot of fantastic work has been done already by SCRA and CHS to address some of these, and anybody going to a hearing now will find it a much more friendly, accessible experience than it has been in the past. But our group wants to look at this in a much more radical way and to address these issues that children and young people have raised. However, the decisions of our children's hearing are going to be of no good unless they can be properly implemented, unless the wishes and the intentions of the panel who made the decision in the best interests of the children they're dealing with can be implemented. So the next chapter that we're dealing with is to meet the needs of children after the hearing takes place. This category looks at accountability for decisions. How can panels be reassured that orders are implemented? So under this heading, we will address that issue of accountability, the implementation authorities, requirement to ensure that decisions of hearings are effectively implemented and children, young people and families supported in the way the hearings intended to achieve the best outcomes, and to ensure that those professionals who are supporting the children and young people through their journey, from before the hearing, through the hearing, and most crucially afterwards, to find the best solution for them throughout their lives, are fully supported, and those are the social workers. The final chapter of our list of issues addresses the relationship between the children's hearing system and the criminal justice system. But in fact, many of you will be aware that the Scottish Government have recently issued a consultation paper in respect of the Children and the Child Care and Justice Bill. And we believe, having considered that much of the work that we would want to do under this heading is addressed by that consultation, is going to be addressed by that bill. And I'll be quite candid with you that in some respects, the implied ambition of the Scottish Government in the consultation goes a little bit further than we might have been thinking of ourselves. So we feel very positive about the developments in relation to that. But suffice to say that issue of the relationship between the children's hearing system and the criminal justice system is one that we want to address, and we believe that there's a fantastic opportunity here to bring these two institutions closer together and to create greater consistency between both of them as to how they deal with young people. So that's a very broad outline of the issues list and the 57 issues that we have. How are we approaching this task? One of the learning points for me has been to recognise that this is a partnership, this working group. This is not a case of producing a consultation paper and sending it out with a questionnaire for people to respond to. This is truly a collaborative design project. And so we're going to be, first of all, developing a framework of the legislation and case law around each of these issues. We're going to consider all the recent research around the children's hearing system and working closely with the Office of the Chief Designer to take partners through a service design approach to take the as-is into the what could be.
We're going to talk a bit about the Scottish approach to service design, so our design approach to this work. But before we do that, we're just going to quickly introduce ourselves. My name's Rachel Dowell. I head up the strategic design team within the Office of the Chief Designer. The Office of the Chief Designer is a division within the Scottish Government, and what we do is we work across lots of different organisations and different public service areas to think about how to approach involving people in design of those services, but also helping people think about how to work together, how to collaborate. So you'll hear that word collaborate a lot as we go through our presentation. The wonderful thing about our work and where we're situated is that we get that cross-section across lots of different organisations, and we can support organisations and teams to do the things that we know we should do, which is to get out of our organisational viewpoints and really work together, because we know that public services don't begin and end from the perspective of organisations. We want to look at what those feel like for the people who are impacted and who need those services. So it's really wonderful to be able to work across those types of projects, and in particular work across the Promise Scotland, and actually think about how do we support organisations to come together in that way. It sounds it's not so easy, particularly when we're trying to rethink and reshape what that future state is, as David said. So before I start sharing some slides where we're going to talk a little bit about the Scottish approach to service design, which is the way of working, the methodology, we would quite like to take you through that today, why we think that's an important approach and the work that's been done to date and what's to come next. I'm going to ask Kirsty, my colleague in the Office of Chief Designer, who's probably the real brains and the delivery focus behind this work, working alongside SCRA and CHS to do a lot of the scoping and prep work for this today. Just to say hello, so you can see her and she can tell you a bit about her and herself and her role in this piece of work. And then we'll share some slides and talk you through that approach.
Brilliant, I think that's me on now. So hello everybody, my name's Kirsty Sinclair, so I work alongside Rachel in the Office of the Chief Designer, and I get to spend my days also working alongside Promise Scotland, developing our design approach, particularly with the children's hearing work, which is where we're doing a lot of intensive work. We're going to both be speaking through a couple of slides in a few minutes, but you will just see Rachel's face during that period. So wanted to come along and say a quick hello and introduce you to myself. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process that we go through, the methodology that we use and how we're applying that into the Promise Scotland work and into children's hearing in particular. So hear a little bit more from me in a few minutes.
Thanks, Kirsty. I'm going to share those slides now, so hopefully that will go without a hitch. Okay, give me a nod, Kirsty, if you can see that okay. Fantastic, thank you. So yes, we're going to talk a bit about the approach we're taking to the design of the children's hearing system, or the kind of the rethink or the reshape of that. The work that we do is very much kind of thinking about how to bring in design methodologies, ways of thinking, ways of working, different tools and techniques that really help organisations come together around a common area that needs improvement or needs to be worked on. And we provide guidance and training, and we embed that within those organisations. And it's been really interesting over the last 2 years to be involved in the Promise Scotland work and collaborate with the Promise Scotland to work across lots of different organisations and think about what's important and what's needed to be able to make that shift and really implement those findings of the peer review. What's really important to stress is that the work that we do it's not going to be the entirety of the offer that comes from the Promise Scotland. So the kind of service design resource and the support and the work that we do sits alongside a much broader support offer provided by the overall support team within the Promise Scotland. And I think that's really important to note, because while there's lots of interventions and work that we do across different teams and scoping and shaping different programmes of work, it's an ongoing piece. It's building ways of working, but really importantly, a lot of that's around making connections across different organisations and forming new relationships and understanding where we need to come together around specific areas. I think that's really well illustrated through the fundamentals and the Promise 21-24 in the plan, which really helps us see that those fundamental priority areas aren't really areas that are held or owned by any one area. They're qualities that we want to embed in that future state. And all of these elements come into all of the different work that we do. So specifically, we'll be thinking about this in line with the children's hearing system, but similarly across any other project, we would do the same. And it's really important to be able to make those connections and support different organisations and different practitioners to see different perspectives and see progress that's been made, so that we don't duplicate effort and that we're sharing and reusing wherever possible. I'm going to hand over to Kirsty now to talk us through the Scottish approach to service design and what that looks and feels like, and a bit about those principles.
Wonderful. So yes, I'm going to take you through this slightly wordy slide. Don't feel that you have to read it along with me, but we were just wanting to give a bit of an overview and an introduction as to why it is that we use this methodology within all of our work across government, across public sector, and in particular children's hearing and the Promise Scotland. So the slightly wordy title, the Scottish approach to service design, doesn't mean that we do service design work differently in Scotland and the Scottish Government compared to how other governments across the world are doing it. In fact, people with my job role in governments across the world work very similarly to each other and share lots about our approaches. But naming it as such means that it fits in and fits well with the Scottish approach to policy making, and it also fits incredibly well with our national performance framework that puts the people who benefit from services and use services at the heart of how not only those services are delivered, but how they're designed and put together. Hence its name. So it gives us a slightly snazzy acronym that we can search for across Twitter as well, if you're looking to keep up to date with where and how it is being used. There is a playbook that we've written that sort of outlines the approach to the Scottish approach to service design, and if you're particularly wanting to bring it into your organisation or into your service, how to go about selling it to those who could be working in this way. And outlined within that are 7 key principles that are well worth a look up. And those essentially highlight what I'll take you through in this slide, which is really about, this approach is about taking the time to design services well. It's about understanding the people that are involved, the people that are connected to those services, and bringing them into the process. So working together, collaborating, having the right people around the table and in rooms so that we're making decisions together, so that voices are heard and so that people are part of that process all the way through. So in reality, that looks like a lot of group work. It's a lot of exercises. It's a lot of time spent discussing and time spent deliberating, working through things together, and crucially with design work, making it real, making it visible so that you can test things out, so you can take them to other people and trial them out. We follow a design process to do this. So in the design process, which is often known as the double diamond, which is illustrated with this sort of little diagram in the middle of the screen here, is essentially in 2 parts. The first part allows you to make sure that you're doing the right thing. So going out and speaking to the right people, making sure you're having all views listened to and taken in, and then making sure that actually what it is that you should be focusing on. Quite often we start projects or we start with solutions in mind, and actually this first half of the diamond allows us the time and space and the activities to actually go out and question and understand what's really happening and where we should be focusing our attention. So the first half is all about doing the right thing and making sure we're focusing on that. The second half is doing that thing right. So giving ourselves time and space and activities to again collaborate around what should the ideas around creating a solution towards these particular issues be. And it means we can be inventing things, we can be creating stuff, we can be making things visual, we can be taking them out to people to test and focusing on what that delivery needs to look like. So we go out and we go in, and we go out and we go in. That means that there are multiple points where the process is opened up and more people can be part of it. So we can go out to our sort of broader stakeholders or critical friends, the people who are in and around the service and connected to it, and ask for their opinions, understand their needs, and also test our ideas with them. So it's a continuous process of making sure we're on the right track. Now, for the people involved in that process, it can feel really exciting because you're continuously moving forward. You're always checking. You always have other people to test your ideas with. So at times it can feel really fast, but it can also feel a little bit frustrating at times if you're getting answers that are different to what you're expecting. regardless of how truthful they are. But following the process and following the activities means that you're always moving forward, you're always asking the right questions and getting the right answers to help you move forward. So really, regardless of how that feels as a process, we know it's a tried and tested method that brings the right people together to make sure that all views are heard, that it's a collaborative process, that we move through it at a correct pace, and that ultimately the right people are involved are making the decisions as to what those services should look like. I'm going to share a little bit more about that in the following slides.
Thanks, Kirsty. So in a nutshell, the reason we think that service design approach is so important, and particularly in this context, is just never losing sight of the fact that this is scoped and shaped and all considerations around the people who are actually going to access those services or go through those processes, but critically involving them in those moments and those design processes, bringing people together. It's really important also that we make sure that people who are involved in actually delivering those services or are part of that broader ecosystem that Kirsty described there have the opportunity to be involved too. And obviously part of this engagement process is making sure that we can pick up and understand any of those gaps, or make sure that we understand elements that are important to different organisations that we may not have understood previously. Really focusing on that overall experience. Obviously, as David was talking through the issues list, there's so many different moving parts to that overall experience, whether that be policy, whether that be guidance, whether that be legislation that underpins the process. But really for us, being able to hold that all together around that overall experience that someone has going through that. So making sure that we don't lose sight of the big picture, especially when it comes to lots of organisations coming in and out of that picture throughout a longer period of time. So it's really important that we focus on where those relationships are, where those communications happen between organisations, and really focusing in on those really important points, those fundamental points around the principles of what we want this to look and feel like to people. That is how we think we'll make a service that's going to work for everyone, those who experience it, but also those who are going to deliver it. And that's why it feels like such a complex piece of work at times when you're going through that process, because there are all different moving parts that you have to orchestrate and bring together in sequence in a way that means that it works. And the only way to do that is to do that collaboratively, to really understand what connects where, how does a whole big jigsaw fit together, and how do we make sure that we don't miss any really critical parts of it. And that's bringing together people from organisations, staff within organisations who deliver those services, people with lived experience, and making sure that we bring them together through that design process to work collaboratively through those moments. So we're building on the design support offer, which has been in place with the partnership we've had with the Promise Scotland for over a year now, and really just working through that design process that Kirsty talked through and really embedding those principles. And fundamentally, it's about being able to offer, facilitate those spaces for folks to come together to work through areas such as thinking about where are the areas going to focus, what are the problems we want to solve, where do the issues lists manifest themselves into that overall experience, and really think about who it's going to affect, who needs to come around the table to work together on those things. How do we make sure that we bring together everything we know, make sense of all of the research that's already out there? And there is so much information already out there. We're not trying to recreate the really good work that's already been done to date, and all the different research projects that are underway are going to figure into this process. So it's an opportunity for people to get together and consider and make sense of that. Also thinking about how the whole service hangs together. So taking time to actually map out. Mapping is a really critical part of the process that we work through, making sure that we can see who comes together, who needs to work together, but equally how all the different parts relate to one another. We also think about what is the method that we want to use for prioritisation, and how is it we want to measure what really matters to people, so that can really be a guiding principle throughout the whole delivery process. That then allows us to go into that process of thinking about what are the opportunities for change. Can we be radical about how we do things and really not work within the constraints of the current system, and really build on the really good work that's already happening across lots of different organisations and within the organisations that have lots of improvement work underway at the moment. don't want to recreate or duplicate. We want to build on that really good practice. So reaching into that and actually making sure that we understand what that is and what that looks like and how that can figure into that overall service view. So we go through that whole process, and fundamentally the really important thing about that is, as we said, it's about collaboration. It's about going through those different steps, going through that process, using those tools and methods, but doing that with the right people working together, building relationships and making sure that we pave a path for participation so that those with lived experience can be involved throughout. And a lot of that work has already been happening, which is what I'm going to hand back to Kirsty, and she's going to talk us through a bit some of the scoping work that's been done to date, particularly using some of those tools and methods and what's going to come next.
Now you'll be able to see a slide with part of a very large diagram on it. This is a visual where, as Rachel said, we've started on the scoping work, which is a slightly jargon term that we use to refer to how we start projects like this. So when David was speaking, he talked about the fact that this is a massive piece of redesign. This is something where radical changes is sought after, essentially, and it's really exciting to begin a piece of design work, collaborative design work, with that as a brief. And the way that we start that is by doing an exercise that we quite often call as scoping. So we look at the service and the system as it currently is, and we get an idea and a viewpoint of how it's working. What are all the interconnected parts? Who are the people that are involved? How do things feel for them? And really we're wanting to illustrate today that so much work has been done to date to sort of understand all of those interconnected services in and around the children's hearing system. You won't be able to see everything on this visual, but it follows that process of referral, organising and scheduling the hearing itself, and then followed by any appeals, reviews and enforcements as well. So it's a very long, thin diagram that takes a cut through that process and looks to map all the people that are involved, so therefore all the people that we need to involve in the redesign process. It's framed through the experience of a child or a family. They're always at the top of everything that we do, and that allows us to see what needs to change behind the scenes to make improvements for them. It also allows us to map where some of those improvements are already starting to happen. So as Rachel said, we're not duplicating effort, we're understanding where work is already underway and how it might fit, how all these pieces of work might fit together. So some of that might involve changes to legislation or guidance, and ultimately help with decision making across that process. Or it might simply be channels for better communication, how we name things, how people experience these particular moments. So being able to see and align all of these moving parts helps us make sure that the systems and processes are working as they should be. And this work also sort of sits alongside and fits in really well with the issues list that David spoke us through earlier. So we're going to share a little bit about how we go from this part of the process of understanding how the system and service is currently running to how we move into a part of the design process where we're looking at making things better. And we are going to do that with a series of project teams. So we've talked a lot about collaborating and of bringing the right people together and of making decisions together. We're wanting to work in this way across the next couple of months within the Children's Hearing project work. We're going to identify these sort of 3 specific areas which broadly cover the sort of before, during and after a hearing process, which line up really nicely with the issues list headings. That means that we have teams operating concurrently within those spaces, each building up a number of prototypes, and again we use that word to essentially say design ideas made real and tested with people. So all of these and those prototypes might be things that you can hold in your hand or on your phone. They might be a way of naming things, they might be a conversation that needs to happen, a network that needs to be interconnected in a different way. It might be a job role that's never existed before that we need to create and test out. So things made real that can essentially help to improve the service and help the experience for the young people, family members and staff going through this process. So each of those project teams will be producing prototyped ideas to test, and that will work forward into what we're calling proposals. So visuals of this sort of service of the future, how that's all going to interconnect, how it's all going to link up together and operate through this sort of before, during and after stages. So not becoming 3 separate documents or proposals themselves, but joining up into an entire unified service with all of its interconnected parts, understanding each other and working together to provide a better service. These in turn help to feed into the working group's awareness and reflection exercise, which is scheduled for later on in the year. But because this work is going to be so live and so visual and so present, we've got the opportunities to bring it upstream a little bit and make sure that everybody's aware of what's being proposed, what's being tested, and how that might have an impact on people in the future. So with that in mind, we wanted to share a little bit about how and when we're going to be doing this, because this is happening quite soon for all of us. So we're going to be taking these projects and these teams through this design process, through these sets of activities and moments to help to structure those ideas. So to get a better understanding of who it is that they need to be working for and what people's needs are in those particular areas, where the focus should be for those prototypes, what it is that we should be creating and making together and testing, and then giving ourselves time to develop ideas and create them for real to test out, as well as time to trial with people who know the services best. We're running these through what we call a design school, which is a structured activity that's going to be running across the summer with a series of other project areas doing work elsewhere within children's social care. So we're going to start with these project teams this month. We're getting together before the end of the month to get started into our understanding of user needs phase, and we're going to be working across June, July and August throughout the steps and activities with these project groups. Because the work is live and is visual, you could probably expect some updates on that as well.